everyone, welcome. In today's video we are looking at the 2024 CB650R Honda and what are some of the things I actually dislike about it, what are some of the things that could have been a little bit better, and what are the things that separate this bike from being absolutely perfect. First of all, I just like to point out that this is not me saying that you should not buy this bike or that it is in any way a bad bike. I'm simply sharing some of the little inconveniences I had with it, and none of them are a deal breaker in terms of that this bike is not worth buying. As a reference, I would also like to say that I own this bike for well over a year now, drove over 18,000 kilometers with it in 2024 alone, and experienced a lot of different riding situations on it, so I think I can give you a proper opinion on it. So let's get right into it, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Well, first and foremost, we have the power delivery of this engine. Now, this might seem a little contradictory because the engine is a big reason of why I decided to buy this bike in the first place, and it is an absolutely beautiful power plant, there's no doubt about that. But as a small displacement 4-cylinder, it has a few drawbacks. The power delivery is pretty linear and very predictable, which makes it so enjoyable and easy to ride, especially for a beginner like me who was still developing the feeling to operate a throttle properly. But this same linear power delivery makes it sometimes a little bit inconvenient because you just don't really have access to that much power in the lower RPMs, and you really need to push this bike all the time if you want real power and real accelerations. Now, while a beginner might appreciate this because it really is hard to give this bike too much throttle by accident, a more experienced rider will see the same thing simply as a lack of power. Already in my first year of riding, I have been in plenty of situations where I felt this lack of power down low, for example when cruising at around 60 to 70 kilometers per hour in 4th gear, and when I wanted to overtake someone, I always have to shift the gear down, sometimes even 2, just to have enough power for a safe overtake. Basically, I put on my left indicator, fully open up the throttle, and really not that much happens with this bike if you're at around 4000 RPM. It sort of needs a moment to build up the revs, and then it starts to go. So you really have to always make sure you are in the right RPM for the situation you are in. Don't get me wrong, the accelerations in any gear and RPM are still fast, but just not something you would expect from a sports bike like this. I've been surprised so many times when I fully opened up the throttle in the lower RPMs and there was just simply not much going on, to be honest, and the accelerations could be compared to something of a car with around 200 horsepower. I mean, it's okay, but nothing impressive, you know. I still managed to overtake people safely, but it's always this feeling like I'm missing out on the power higher up just because I'm in the wrong gear. But the whole thing completely changes once you go past 7000 and 8000 RPM. The engine really comes alive and the bike all of a sudden becomes a completely different animal. Of course, I knew this before getting this bike and it is exactly what I was looking for, but these same engine characteristics maybe make it not so great if you're looking for a daily commuter bike where you spend a lot of time in stop and go traffic and doing a lot of overtaking. You're probably much better off with a torquier twin-cylinder engine in that case, because the 4-cylinder will simply require too much work from you in a way to access that needed torque, which is mostly up high in the rev range, and I know how inconvenient and difficult it is to rev out the bike in dense traffic situations. But the same issue makes it a very beautiful bike on back roads where you can really push the engine and get every last bit of power out of it in the higher revs, and that is exactly how I ride like 95% of the time, simply switching between 2nd and 3rd gear, and I occasionally go into 4th. In my opinion, the 600cc's with 4 cylinders are really a wonderful combination because they allow you to use the whole rev range of the engine without going insanely fast like you would on a 1000cc, but at the same time it sort of robs you of that punch down low, which is sometimes needed, especially when commuting on a daily basis. So it really is just about pros and cons here and how will you ride this bike most of the time when you're deciding to buy it. Okay, the second issue is seat comfort. I do have some issues with the seat, and as I did my research online, a lot of other people seem to have them as well. The seat on this CB650 is pretty hard, and for me personally it gets uncomfortable after around 2 hours of uninterrupted riding. Now this can all be avoided by wearing some padded clothing or underwear and problem solved, right? Unfortunately, I also find the seat slightly short and tilted forward too much, which makes me adjust to the back of the seat constantly because I always tend to slide forwards. In case you were wondering what's this weird move in my videos, it's simply me adjusting my seating position. Please bear in mind that I am quite tall for this bike and that it is far away from a perfect fit for me. And at the end of the day, we all know that sports bikes like this CB650 are no sofas on wheels, and we always expect some discomfort on longer rides, but the seat has been a known issue since the 2019 model and has seen no improvement. I just wish they made the seat slightly softer and longer so I wouldn't constantly slide forward. That way, it would be much better. Another issue is the lack of technology for this price. There is no doubt that lack of technology on this bike is really starting to become obvious when compared to some other competitors. The biggest issue is the use of the dated ride-by-cable throttle instead of the more modern ride-by-wire. Sure, there is the new e-clutch model, which is nice, but still it somehow makes no sense for me to have a quick shifter that works up and down but doesn't blip the throttle, which it obviously can't because it's not ride-by-wire. This is just something that is missing from the e-clutch in my opinion and is one of the reasons why I opted for the old school non-e-clutch model. For the price of this bike, you would really expect it to have ride-by-wire and things like a quick shifter with a blipper as standard, since a lot of competition has ride-by-wire, which makes the CB650R truly dated in comparison. However, I think it's not all bad. I think it's still a very good thing that you can buy a brand new naked bike with 600cc and 4 cylinders with normal cable throttle these days, when old school driving machines like this Honda are literally becoming a dying breed. I think this model is the only 600 4-cylinder naked bike you can buy today, at least here in Europe. So for that I'm truly grateful, but objectively you can get more modern bikes with more technology for the same money, if this is what you're looking for, of course. The 2024 model also comes with a brand new TFT display that looks truly great, but unfortunately in my region I cannot download the Honda RoadSync app to my phone and make the navigation work. Apparently our government decided that you shouldn't have that many information at your disposal while riding a motorcycle. There is a way around this by downloading the app from some other store, but I am a Google Maps guy anyway, so I just use Quad Lock and my phone. Of course, this all comes down in which region you are, but in some countries just like mine, you don't have access to download the RoadSync app, which makes navigation and music virtually a useless feature on this bike, even though you pay for it. But one thing worth pointing out is that the display also seems very prone to scratching. Mine got pretty scratched up in the first 1000 kilometers and I don't even know how it happened, to be honest. I barely cleaned or touched the display and the scratches just appeared there, so my advice would be to just protect the screen immediately after you get this bike, because it seems that it is very delicate. The next issue is that this bike is not that resistant to water, and that really surprised me. Obviously, you have to be somewhat cautious while washing a bike. The water can get into everywhere and cause damage to some electrical components and sensors. This is why you should always avoid cleaning your bike with a high pressure water cleaner. And that is exactly what I always did and used the normal low pressure garden hose, which was most of the time set to sprinkling anyway. But one time when I cleaned the bike, I later turned it on and a check engine light appeared out of nowhere. The bike ran fine and with no issues, but obviously when something like this happens, it does trigger some concern, so I took the bike to the dealer where they reassured me that the bike is fine and that probably just some moisture got into the sensors. They also told me to just let the bike dry for a few days, and it took almost 3 full days for the check engine light to disappear after I parked it into a heated garage. I have seen people pressure wash their motorcycles without care and not having any of these issues, so this obviously raised the question of how waterproof this bike actually is. I did some research on the internet and found out that quite a few people were dealing with those same issues, not just after washing the bike, but also when riding in wet conditions. Some owners report that the signals start to flash randomly and cannot be turned off, and others seem to have problems with the dashboard. I never experienced those issues, but it really looks like this bike is not that water resistant, so I'm definitely paying more attention to how I'm washing this bike in the future. So the last thing that is slightly annoying on this bike are the vibrations and the sounds they make. I don't mean the vibrations of the engine and the frame itself, but the vibrating plastics and other parts that are put on the bike. Immediately when the bike was still brand new, I noticed a significant rattle coming from the license plate holder. This was an issue easily fixed just by putting some thin foam under the license plate, but after that I started noticing many other rattles on the bike as well. One of them was coming from the passenger footpegs, which I also managed to eliminate just by placing some rubber band between the bolt and the nut, but other rattles still remained. Under 8000 RPM, there really are no issues with those rattling noises, but once you go above, you really start to hear the plastic around the rear light rattling and vibrating excessively. In some of my videos, especially the early ones, you can really hear the vibrating noises this bike produced. You see what I mean? If you look closely while the bike is still and start moving the plastic around the rear light, you notice that it is perhaps done so on purpose to allow for those vibrations so the plastic does not crack from those same vibrations. I was curious about these issues and asked other owners of this bike if that is the case with their bike as well. They confirmed this and reassured that it is supposed to be like that so the plastic has some wiggle room for vibrations, which prevents it from cracking. I really understand this design, but still can't get over the fact that it makes the bike feel slightly cheap from time to time, and is something I haven't really noticed while observing some other bikes in this price category. Even more annoying than the plastic around the rear light are the vibrations coming from the keyhole. Just by touching and moving the metal part on the keyhole, you can see how much this thing vibrates once you go past 8000 RPM. I'm aware that I'm sort of being really picky here and that most people wouldn't even notice something like this. But for example, I ride with earplugs, which reduce the wind noise tremendously, and that's why I can hear everything on my bike very clearly. The engine, the transmission, and those rattling vibrations of some bike parts really become apparent and uncomfortable sometimes. However, I do have to admit that the amount of annoying vibrations and rattling coming from the bike has come down drastically in the last couple of thousand kilometers and is now at a level where I barely notice it anymore, but I really did not expect to deal with this issue. So there you have it. These are pretty much the only things that slightly annoyed me in the last year of owning this bike, and to be honest, it has been an absolute joy, and all of these things are really not that big of a deal. I do not regret buying this bike, and if I were to start riding again as a complete beginner, I would buy the exact same bike. Thank you for watching, everyone. I really hope you found this video useful and that I can help you make your decision easier when considering buying this beautiful Honda CB650R. Take care and see you in the next video.